Hey, welcome everybody to Hollywood on the Rocks. I'm Alan Ing. I'm going to turn the music down. I'm the editor-in-chief of Film Threat. And welcome. I've got a special guest today, Script Doctor. We're going to talk about Furiosa and the apparent demise or death, slow death of the box office. And we got a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about that I think you're going to find interesting. So with that, let's get this show started. Hey, Script Doctor, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Alan. I'm honored to be on Film Threat again. It's always a blast talking with you, Chris, and everyone else. So
Yeah, well,
Wednesday.
I think I like the Wednesday thing. We kind of, Chris is still kind of recovering. He just did the nooner for a couple hours and just trying to kind of ease his burden back in terms of getting into all the streaming. So it's been kind of fun to have guests and. You're someone that, it's like we're on these large panels a lot and there's all this struggle and fighting to talk. And I kind of like this one-on-one conversation that I've been able to do for the last few weeks.
Oh, I like these types of things too. Like even when I do my Saturday show, I was originally thinking of doing a panel show of, covering screenplays that are circulating Hollywood, but I realized there'd be too many opinions and it might go on too long. So usually a two-hander, you have a bit more of a focused show. And you can control like the length, and you can also keep everybody on topic a lot easier. So I mean, I'm not against panel shows. I think they're fantastic, but I just like sometimes there's a certain format that works best for that. And this is why I like Hollywood on the Rocks versus even your live show that you do on Fridays with you and Chris is like always a blast to listen to, because it's like, I mean, I used to read Film Threat magazine when I started out in 06. Like I'd find old copies and stuff in the Paramount lobby, just like hanging around there. I don't know if they were purchased by Paramount or Chris left them there to get attention, but that you'd flip through them because you'd always get different reviews and different coverage and takes on what's going on in the indie film and Hollywood scene.
Yeah. So Paramount was the one studio that Chris didn't piss off when he was doing Film Threat.
I mean,
I've been able to read a couple of the old issues of Film Threat, and it's like, we talk a little bit about can we ever go back to that kind of gonzo style of journalism, and in a weird way we're doing that, but I think we're much more toned down and a little more seasoned when it comes to how we approach Hollywood,
which is kind of how you have to do it. I mean, one of the things I kind of learned really quickly is that you could jump in neck deep into the water of Hollywood, or you could approach it at arm's reach. And I think I did the arm's reach stuff because I thought that was better. Because if I didn't, I probably would be crazy like some of the celebrities on social media right now. So I'm kind of happy I'm not in that regards.
Yeah. All right. Well, here we got an important message from Lord Thoth. Like, share, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. Sign up as a member and join us on Discord and Rumble. Buy our merch. I mean, that's everything, all in one sentence, all in one comment. But yeah, become a member, join us on Discord. I'm on there once in a while. And we also have the member tab where we have special videos coming up. Recently had a Q&A where Christopher Nolan was interviewing his brother Jonathan about Fallout. So that video is up there now. What's up? Let's see. All twisted up. Hey, Ing and Doc, happy Wednesday. How's it going? Let's see. And then Bill S. Preston Esquire says the magazine as a format is pretty dead, but blogging and live streams definitely allow a much more raw presentation. Yeah, I'm kind of saddened by the demise of the magazine.
Me too.
To me, it was the glossy pages and the pictures and the articles that went with it. It's kind of that was the magazine, and I do miss those days.
What's funny is that magazines and physical print is cheaper in the long run than the current digital stuff, because you have to maintain the digital stuff in perpetuity. And with print media, posters, magazines, stuff, you put it out there, you're done. It just circulates on its own. You can do a reissue if you need to, and it's cheaper to do a reissue. And the other part is that it's not power dependent. Like if the power goes out, I can read a magazine physically there. I just get a light or go outside or what have you. With today's stuff, if you're on a tablet or phone, if your battery's dead and there's no power to charge it, you're stuck with nothing.
And it's also the news cycle. The fact that the internet is able to jump on a story quickly, while a magazine, you do have there's so much layout, so much writing you have to do.
And research.
And yeah, it's like you're lucky to get a magazine out a week, let alone a month. And by the time it comes out, you like I appreciate Empire magazine in the sense that they're able to kind of overcome that long time gap and just write articles about movies that approaches things differently than this news cycle that we're under.
Oh yeah, I mean that's one of the things I like about Empire and Film Thread is you guys get enough advanced screening where you can actually do your articles, your reviews, get them out in sync with the movie so that people are like your fingers on the pulse of the industry itself. After the fact reporting is it's already dead because everybody's
all right, so Sons and Shadows, it's Doc Ing. That's right. And from Brock Samsonite, $10 says Furiosa flopping at the box office will mark the fall of Anya Taylor-Joy's wave of popularity and the rise of Sydney Sweeney. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Let me pull up the numbers here. Give me one moment. And so Furiosa came out on last Thursday, and so far has earned 35 million domestic, 67.8 million worldwide. This is more telling than it is interesting, because I think for the most part, Furiosa as a film has gotten good reviews by critics and by audiences. I think personally, I felt like the action was fun. I felt like, though it was too damn long. And I have a theory about that, but I'm curious. The overall love for the film versus the actual box office is quite telling. What were your thoughts about the film, and what are your thoughts about the box office over the weekend?
Well, I was trying to get in to see the film, but unfortunately I had a bunch of interviews and pitches over the last weekend and week, so I haven't checked it out. However, I do know a great deal about George Miller. I have some friends that know him personally. I've got to make that connection myself. I'm trying to, but it's hard. I think one of the things that kind of hurt this is the marketing, and the first part being the title. Furiosa would have been fine, but adding a Mad Max story tends to be false advertising because
it's a reminder of what the movie's not.
Exactly. And the thing is that Mad Max is a legend of sorts. George Miller said shortly after, I think, Road Warrior leading up into Beyond Thunderdome, is that even though Mel Gibson is playing the character in those movies, from the perspective of the people telling the stories, because they're all, except for the first one, they're all told in the past. Like in the Road Warrior, the kid with the boomerang is actually an old man who's telling the story, and we're hearing his voiceover of what's going on with this Max and this adventure that happened. And then Beyond Thunderdome is the children in the valley recounting their story of interacting with this guy that's known as Max. The concept for them is that it may have been a different guy named Max who's helped them, but we as the audience are seeing it as one story because it's an amalgamation of all these stories told as once. And that was the fun part, because all the worlds are different in every single Mad Max story. There's some similarities, but there's more extremes in regards to the apocalypse that Mad Max is set in. And Fury Road just really amped it up, huge. But the stories are, aside from the first Mad Max, all the other Mad Max stories aren't really about Mad Max. They're about the places he goes and the people he interacts with there. And Fury Road was one of them. And a lot of people complained, and justifiably so, that, no Mel Gibson and Tom Hardy was okay. And, I thought the plot was bad because they were just driving out and then to turn around and drive back. It's like, if you guys, kids in the back, don't calm down, I'm turning this car around. That is literally Fury Road.
And I don't remember him having necessarily a character arc.
No,
I just saw him as a guy going through hell and coming out on top in the end.
Yeah, like the Man with No Name has more of a character arc in the Fistful of Dollars trilogy. Mad Max, he's a facilitator. He's this guy that kind of does things, but the story is really the setting and those characters there in each and every movie. It's part of its anthology approach. I think the fact that George Miller, for some reason, decided to add a Mad Max story to Furiosa is what's causing a lot of people to be apprehensive of watching it, because you're essentially saying it's a Mad Max story, but it's about Furiosa before Mad Max meets Furiosa. it's like, no, just sell us on Furiosa. Try it that way, and because again, this is what he's doing. He has actually picked one setting that he really liked recently with the Fury Road, and he's doing another movie in that setting, which he's never done before with Mad Max. We've never gone back to the village and the Road Warrior. We've never gone back to the village of Thunderdome, but this is the first time we were going back to this world. So there's something to it there that George Miller really liked.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I'll definitely say that the world building in this one is that I think that's what intrigued me more about Furiosa than about Fury Road. That I'm getting a sense of this world, who the players are, and it makes more sense when you go into Fury Road, the motivations of these certain factions. I
saw Robert Meyer Burnett retweeted somebody who did an analysis on this, and he basically said Furiosa shouldn't be its own standalone movie. It should be a complementary film to Fury Road, like how the Animatrix was to the Matrix trilogy.
Yeah,
like that's how it was should have been. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll say it. It's, to me, it was a very good prequel. It's probably one of the better prequels. As much as we hate prequels, this is probably one of the better ones, and only because it does lead into the next movie without feeling forced. When Furiosa and Fury Road was hoping to find the quest was to find the green, find the world of abundance. And in that movie it was kind of this dream, this legend, but in this movie you actually feel that you actually see the real place, that this was an actual location, and that Furiosa's journey was to basically return to Eden, and that was her lifelong journey, and I kind of like that. Let me ask you this question though, and then I'll give you my theory as to why Furiosa and films like it aren't working, but what's striking and what's telling about Furiosa and The Fall Guy is that word of mouth is not working anymore. Because you have two ostensibly good movies with good buzz, but that buzz is not drawing people back into theaters. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's actually antithetical to what you need in marketing, because marketing is the entire purpose of marketing is to get people to talk about it, which is dependent on word of mouth, because that is the best form of getting people into the theater or getting people to buy or do anything is word of mouth. So the fact that we've had I guess a decade of movies that were mixed and underperformed and also kind of hoodwinked audiences has created a pattern to basically be very cautious about how reliable word of mouth can be these days. Because there's tons of word of mouth with Star Wars The Force Awakens, but I didn't see it in theaters because I hated J.J. Abrams. And when I did finally see it, I'm like, this is terrible. How did this make, $2 billion on the box office? But again, it comes down to word of mouth, and word of mouth allows for you to get your first opening box office weekend, but it's now up to the product to make people want to come back and see it again.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think it's been really hard with the way Hollywood has been producing these tentpole films to focus on the repeat viewing aspect of it. Sometimes things are so on the nose and so direct that you get it in one watch and you're like, oh, okay. And then there's no substance to it. There's nothing else there to make you think or want to go back and see again, or maybe be like, oh, people were laughing at that part, but it was funny and I didn't quite get all of it. So I really enjoyed it. So I want to go back and see it again. So maybe I can catch what was said there. So I don't have to wait for it to, back in the day, you wait for it on video, but now it's streaming. And then studios are rushing to the streaming platform because they think that's where the audience is nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I'll also say, look, you're a member of WGA, so you're included in this thought. But the strike, both strikes, as much as it was about you guys and the studios fighting over it, it's the audience that I think, even it happens with every strike. The audience is just fed up with these entities fighting amongst themselves, and the audience just watching it and realizing that maybe the products that they're fighting over is not that good, and not because what has been post strike, after Barbie and Oppenheimer, what was the big hit? And it feels like everything that came out after Oppenheimer and Barbie just underperformed and it just hasn't recovered. And I think the audiences kind of resent the WGA, SAG, and the producers for putting us into this position?
Well, there's a couple of factors in there. The first one is that there's not enough elapsed time has come for there to be put into production a post-strike film. Like everything else is just picked up where it left off, right? Because we struck
Right.
for 7
But
months.
but
You
even
can't
the
make.
films that were done before the strike
Mhm.
underperformed. I mean, I'm
Well, I
drawing
mean,
the line
no,
right
no.
at July when
Oh yeah,
Oppenheimer
yeah.
came out, and then after that, you still had movies coming out,
Mhm.
but they all underperformed.
They all underperformed, and this goes back to the 2007 strike, which is that for some strange reason, um, the representatives of the WGA don't know how to market their own strike properly
Mhm.
because they always focus on the money. And while that's an important part and definitely a motivator, the real problem was that they didn't convey the fact that in the '07 strike was about web streaming and the new medium delivery system of content to users, and how the studios were trying to cut corners and circumvent pay across the board to pump out weaker quality content, and by way of, because reality TV had started taking off and that was what really drew audiences in, and that's where the market kind of leaned towards. So it's a very reciprocal relationship. Whatever the audience starts gravitating towards, the market will gear towards. Even if it's a fad, which reality TV is to a degree, the market will hold on to it and try to exploit that and stretch it out as long as they could because it's considered easier money than the creative side of things. And
Mhm.
that's what the strike '07 strike was kind of about. But the WGA at the time, and I wasn't a member yet, did not know how to market that, which is silly because they're writers. They should know how to sell an idea. But again, some of the higher ups that were at WGA
Mhm.
at the time didn't know how to do that properly. The most recent strike had a very different approach, but it still had some of the older generation saying the dumb stuff about greed, money, and all that stuff. It wasn't about that. It was really about cutting. It was about saving, technically, California, because California's economy is dependent on the film industry. And if you get rid of the creative aspect of the film industry, you're not making any movies, you're not making any television shows. If you're doing it with generative AI and it's all going to be corporate stuff, the corporate stuff that audiences haven't been responding to, which is what we've been seeing for the past few years. If that's going to be the new Hollywood, the writers were fighting against that because a lot of them were being pushed out, um, because they were a little difficult to work with. When they said, we want to do a prequel to Willy Wonka. Well, you're going to have a lot of writers saying, okay, well, let's do that. And then you're going to have a lot more experienced writers saying, why? I've
Mhm.
got an original story that could be just as whimsical and fun and magical as Willy Wonka. Why don't we do that? Make a new IP, make new money. Marketing gets involved and says, well, that's a higher risk factor. People already know Willy Wonka, so we want to go with that. In which case, the derivative now becomes primary, and it hurts the rest of the industry. But they got very lucky with Willy Wonka because that was, I guess, post strike. That did really well at the box office
Mhm.
for Warner Brothers. But it's the fact that you have the studio system and even the smaller production houses and studios just not wanting to take the risk anymore. And they have a complete misunderstanding of how things work. When they changed the TV model to the streaming model, our television shows, we got way more of them, but they also got really bad. And the good ones were harder to find because you got oversaturated with so much stuff that even if you find something that's good, it's hard for people to latch onto because they just don't have the time. They're spending more time scrolling through the streaming service like a Netflix or a Max or Disney Plus than they are watching the content that's on there.
Yeah. No, I can identify with that. There are times where it's like, oh, I just want to watch something before I go to bed, and then I'm scrolling through all these movies, and I'm just kind of paralyzed. I don't know what to watch. Do I want to see this movie again, or do I want to try a movie that I've never seen again? And I just wind up going to bed and not watching
Yeah.
anything.
And we had 600 new shows last year. That's a lot. That's more than we've ever had before. And on
Mhm.
average, when I was starting out, on average, you get 100 new shows a year. 5 or 10% of those would make it to series. But
Yeah.
now we're getting 600 new shows. A third of those are network and the rest are streaming, and they're already bought and paid for prior to
Yeah.
release, which means they're not even tested. And then they tank and they cost way too much money. And the writer's strike, one of the aspects that I really never expected them to do was basically say, we don't want that prepaid system anymore. We want to do a pilot season. We want to pitch a pilot, get it tested, and earn it to be put to series or put to the
Mhm.
first 13. And I'm like, I've never seen a union want to do that because it's slightly less guaranteed work, but it's there. And then they threw in the residual sections
Yeah.
saying that,
Where
yeah, the
the
more
show succeeds, you succeed.
Yes, and it's like, well, that's a meritocracy stipulation, which means that anyone that can't write a show that could do well is not going to be getting hired, and that's going to spread faster than any other type of reputation you have there. Like, yes, the top 20% of writers are always working because they've earned that spot, and the bottom 80% struggle to get a job because
Yeah.
they're networking and they're developing their skills. And then for the last decade, we've had people that didn't know how to write, but they've checked all these other boxes and they were thrown into the writer's room and they gave us garbage.
All right.
And it was,
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
that was all the crazy stuff there. And I think that goes into the problem with Furiosa is because we've been exposed to so much garbage that audiences are justified in being apprehensive over to what they want to watch, especially when they're seeing a framework of Furiosa that matches a lot of other frameworks that were terrible, that insulted audiences' intelligence and did not entertain and were more about preaching and whatnot. And I thought Furiosa was an interesting character from Fury Road, even though, I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of the movie, but I dug it for what it was.
All right. So we're gonna talk about an article that came out in the LA Times last week, and it's dealing directly with the writers. But I do want to talk about a few other things before that. But I have this theory about not only just Furiosa, but this trend toward female-led action movies or female-led movies. And the theory is that when you look at Furiosa and you compare it to a movie like, back in the old days with Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and why those movies worked and why Furiosa didn't, or why the appeal wasn't there for audiences. And part of me feels like that the problem with a female protagonist is the fact that there are rules and limitations placed upon the way you present a female protagonist. For example, in Furiosa, there was an effort to keep Furiosa as virginal as possible throughout the film, in terms of, don't touch her, don't violate her, and this was a part of that. And to me, it was, you're thinking in your head, yeah, because if they did do something to her, you'd have feminist groups calling the show misogynist. You don't treat women like that, and that got me thinking that one of the problems with having female protagonists today is the fact that you can't go in certain directions with them, in terms of nudity, in terms of violence, that there are just forbidden things. And for me, as a comedian who performs family-friendly comedy on stage, I know full well the problems of placing limitations on creativity. The fact that I think we've gotten to a point where where we're drawing lines, and as writers and creatives in the writers' room, you can't cross those lines. And for me, when you have a female protagonist, there are so many lines you can't cross that now you're creating stories that just don't feel challenging enough, or you don't feel like the stakes are high enough in movies that are led by females versus males. Because quite frankly, you could torture a man. You could torture male characters. You could do horrible things to them and get away with it in movies. You just can't do that with females. Do you feel like, do you think my theory has any validity?
Partially, but there's one caveat to that, which is you can never really truly put restrictions on creativity, because creativity finds a way around them. That's the hallmark of creativity. I mean, look no further than All in the Family. There's a lot of things that they managed to get away with that otherwise you'd know if they'd said it directly, you wouldn't be able to get away with it.
Right. Could you do that today?
You can, if you're smart enough. And that's the problem. Right. Like, how many of the newer writers are actually going back to the history of film and television to understand how they managed to get away with those things, and how they were able to do it to the point where it appeased the people that are putting on those restrictions. Because a lot of the people that are putting on those restrictions, their only agenda is that they just don't want to get phone calls from upset parents.
Yeah. Or they don't want Twitter to blow up.
Or something of that nature. Like, that's the only real reason why they do it. They otherwise don't care. They're just as dirty and filthy as the rest of us. But they put those on there as for two caveats. One, to cover their butts, and two, to see, okay, is this writer creative enough where if we want to do a torture scene with a woman, they can find another way, an allegorical way to do that. There are ways you can do it. I mean, look, one of the things I loved about the blaxploitation films is that Pam Grier, she got assaulted with unapologetically so. but she, her character came back and basically got her vengeance. Those are great films, and you can do it. The thing is, how do you do it to the point where it's not gratuitous, it's not exploitation? Because we had movies like I Spit on Your Grave had a scene so like that, and that was a revenge film. There was even another one. I was like 5 or 6 years ago. I think the woman who played Tomb Raider, I think that's how she got the role to play Tomb Raider. Is like she was like a side piece. Her character was that she was a side piece, and then they decided to leave her out in the middle of the woods or middle of the desert to let her die, and then she came back and killed the men that did all that stuff to her. The thing is that those are the types of stories that don't quite resonate overall with the audience that they're targeting, because I don't think they understand what audience they are targeting. They think, oh, a female-led movie is going to bring in the female audience. Well, no. It's still going to bring in the male audience, and you have to write with that in mind. And some of the times when they write it in that mind, they don't write the female character as a female character. They just write a masculine character and put the female veneer over top of it, and that is inauthentic and it doesn't work. That's why, the most two famous female women we have is Ripley and Sarah Connor. The reason that they work is because they're mothers and they're doing stuff for their children. Like, that's the connection. That's how you justify it. That's the suspension of disbelief that you can make. When you're giving us a single woman, young, nothing, there's no stakes to them aside from their quote unquote virginity or purity. And that is not a personal connection. You have to do something stronger. You have to.
Well, let me challenge you on this point, because the point you're making is creatively you can work around it, and I would question why do we need to work around it? But the other thing is, I feel like that it's not just from a creative standpoint, but it's from also the target audience standpoint. Is that maybe that's why men aren't seeing Furiosa versus Mad Max, is because there's a female protagonist, because there are limitations put on that female protagonist. Therefore, the action and the story is going to be limited, and to the point where men are just not the men who are, let's be real, who are supposed to be the predominant audience for this, the ones shelling out the money, is that maybe that's the reason they're shying away from Furiosa, versus if you had put a Mel Gibson as Mad Max in this movie.
Well, yeah. First of all, Mel Gibson and Mad Max, that brings in the nostalgia to the character, brings in a little bit more authenticity to the project, and it piques our interest. I think what hurts it is the fact that Furiosa doesn't become an interesting character until this movie. So how she was presented in Fury Road didn't make me really want to see a movie about her. I want to see more about Imogen Joe. Like, give me that. Right? I don't care about Furiosa and what her plight is and whatnot. There was something absent. It was hollow, and not to disrespect Charlize Theron, who did what she could, but it's just the substance wasn't really there. You have to make me care about a character in order to watch that movie. One of the best examples recently that worked that way was T'Challa in Civil War. That guy, they made him very interesting. They gave him a very compassionate motivation, which is that someone killed his father in front of him and he was helpless to stop it. And so he wanted to find the person that is responsible and bring them to justice. And when he has the moment where he could possibly kill him, he decides, nope, I'm not going to kill you. You're going to actually be punished for your crime by the society. And then whatever fate they determine, that will be your fate. Whether it will be execution, whether it be imprisonment, that's his moral code coming through. And people were like, man, I want to see a movie about that guy. And then we got Black Panther. Now, it wasn't the best movie, but we got it, and people showed up to it because they were really fascinated and interested in that character. That level of intrigue, I don't think was presented in Furiosa with Fury Road. And then because we have a 10-year gap, it's like, oh, that character, really? Okay, well, maybe, no, I don't know. George Miller, cool, is all the fun, the repetition of the Road Warrior just amped up like 1,000 times is essentially what Fury Road is, and I guess to a degree Furiosa. There's always the car chases. It's always about the cars, the chase, the crazy set pieces, which I think are fun for what they are. But what makes those things interesting is what's at stake, and we're losing stakes a lot in film as well.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned stakes. Furiosa, she's a girl who's kidnapped, kind of sent off into the world being kind of a concubine. She escapes, becomes this badass woman, takes down, exacts revenge on the death of her mother. As good as that story may be, I don't necessarily think that story is the thing that is going to appeal to the audience that the original Mad Max brought in, or the audience you wanted to bring in to make this a blockbuster, which is mostly men. It's and this is where we get canceled, and because we're talking about stories that appeal to men and stories that appeal to women. This movie felt like it was meant to appeal to both men and women, and therefore you lose. I think because you take that approach, you do lose that male audience, and I think we're seeing that here. That A, you're losing the male audience, and B, you're not really gaining the female audience in the end.
Well, where's the intrigue, right? So when you try to appeal to both the male and female demographic, you're playing into those angles. What's really fascinating is that when you play into one of those demographics, when you're bringing the other one in, they get to see a part of the world that they don't normally see. So, for instance, the drama, the passionate drama, or the romantic comedy, women like that. Guys don't always see those types of movies, but they will go with their girlfriends or wives to go watch them, and they get a taste of what that is, and it gives them insight into that world. Same thing with science fiction, action, crime, or thriller. That's not big on. I mean, except for the true crime stuff, women really love that. But you take a woman, to see that with girlfriend, wife, what have you, to see that, it brings them into their world. The only thing that really does appeal to both demographics is mystery, because you got Agatha Christie books, you've got Arthur Conan Doyle books. For some strange reason, mystery hits both demographics, but when it's controlled on a budget side of things, it always performs really well because you're focused on what's the mystery, the question, the intrigue. You're playing into curiosity, which is something that has been kind of sort of weeded out of us generation by generation. I'm finding even my godchildren, some of them, their friends are not curious about anything at all. Like, you pose them a question, like, I don't care. I mean, like, any question, it's like, hey, what's the weather like tomorrow? I don't care. Just they don't want. I mean, and that's the other part too. Has us as an audience and us as a society failed ourselves by not trying to create or stimulate curiosity in the subsequent generations? And if there's no curiosity, then why do we want to go see a movie about Furiosa, a Mad Max story?
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing I tell my kid all the time. It's aren't you curious about this? Don't you want to know how this is made? Don't you? And it's like, no, just want to watch my videos. Okay. Hey, let's go to the chat here and see what y'all have been saying. From Sean Z for 199. Thank you, Sean. I made it. Yep, you're here. One Punch Man Tolkien fan. Crims Henworth stole the show from Furiosa. He did. I mean, it's look, villains tend to steal the show, and there you go.
As they should.
Sean Z again. Gifted one Film Threat membership. Thanks so much, Sean. Whoever got that one, join the Discord. Dominic Zelenik says, no Max, perceived girl boss, niche audience. Movie tickets are too expensive. The sequel waited too long, and parents could not take their kids. Better movie idea, Dementis as the main character. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much... There's just a lot there that was just working against this movie, and it's just sad because, I mean, for the most part, you look at it as what was thrown up on the screen. It's a good movie, but now you throw in not only the trailer, the horribly made trailer, but also the state that the audience is in regarding movies today, and then also what the studios have been doing with stories as of recent. And the only way to save Hollywood is for Hollywood to realize that it needs to be saved and make intentional moves to save itself. And I don't know that they see that or want to do that.
I think they're apprehensive because the way Hollywood stays afloat is by bringing in fresh blood that knows and understands how to make connections with audiences. Right now, they've brought in a lot of people that understand story very well. Like, I know a lot of movies have sucked and people have complained about them. They're justified. But you have to remember that these people beat out thousands of other people that thought they knew story and didn't.
Yeah.
That is the sad, horrifying truth of Hollywood. Because I have I've read tens of thousands of screenplays from
Mhm.
professional writers and amateurs, and I'll tell you this: even the worst screenplay from a professional writer is infinitely better than the best thing from an amateur, because they
Yeah.
just understand the basics far more intuitively, and they've done it for years. But guess what? You amateurs out there, you keep at it, you will get to that level eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying sometimes you need to go to the movies that you love and figure out why you loved it. You know, what
Yeah.
was it? Was it the story? Was it the character? What drew you to it? And then put that in your movie. Um, I watched Doctor Who, the this current season. I've never really watched Doctor Who, but I did notice that there was a concerted attempt to gain a new audience, but it was at the expense of the old audience. And then by trying to gain that new audience, I think that new audience realized how bad the show was and then turned that off. And so you just killed your fan base, and you've not done anything really new or anything spectacular to bring in that fan base that you wanted to bring in, which to me, Doctor Who, this season of Doctor Who is a gay TV show.
Yes, I've not seen it. I left when Capaldi joined, not because of Capaldi. I actually love him, but I saw the pilot before it was aired. Well, my buddy was editing it, and I was revolted by it. And I would say this: so the biggest misunderstanding of modern day marketing is that they always look for a new market share to address,
Mhm.
and instead of going at it inch by inch, which is what they should be doing, they just jump in the
Yeah.
pool.
It's like
And
we need to get this market, and so you make everything for that market because they stupidly assume that the fan base that they grew over decades is going to show up anyways.
well, it's not necessarily stupid. It's based on a pattern, because a lot of people that work on these franchises, they know when they have a piece of crap entry in their
Mhm.
franchise, and yet it's still a successful. So that gives them the false input of like, oh, they'll watch anything so long as it's got this brand on it. And
Right.
the audience kind of affirms that, but they can only affirm that so many times.
Yeah. Well, that's the
And that's
prequel.
one thing.
That's the sequels. Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker. That's where they blew it with the fans
Yes.
because they had an audience. The Force Awakens, they had an audience that was going to see the movie no matter what. And by the time Rise of Skywalker came along, that mentality went away.
Yeah, because number one, you had a little bit of oversaturation. You had
Mhm.
Rogue One and then Solo,
Mhm.
which both movies I felt you didn't need to do, and I despise Rogue One because it really ruins a cool aspect of what Star Wars was. Um, but that's the thing, is you have to inch into new demographics slowly, carefully, and the reason you do it slowly and carefully is so that you can gauge the response. Oh, okay, so we understand that we want to appeal to, say, a homosexual audience. Well, are we sure that they're watching? Are we certain that they're not watching the show?
Mhm.
And they never ask that question. That's one of the things I found with marketing, is that whenever they look at a new demographic, they don't ask the question, are we sure they're watching the show or not? And you always get someone coming in there pitching saying, oh yeah, Star Wars. Well, it's mostly men, so women don't watch it. It's like, no, women do watch it. Figure out what the percentage is, and then ask yourself, is that a good percentage? And if you want a higher percentage, why do you want that? And if you do want that, what of that demographic is appealed? Like, what does it appeal to that demographic? And how do you make that work for Star Wars and not Star Wars work for that, or any franchise work for that? Barbie did something absolutely brilliant, which is that they made Ken more entertaining than Barbie. And that appealed to the male audiences, which is why most men had no problems going to see Barbie, because they're like, I empathize with Ken. Ken is the main character of the Barbie movie. He's the one that goes on the journey and the arc. Barbie does have her own, but it's a dark, satirical one where you don't want to live in that Barbie world. And they make fun of it quite easily on the front, because you have that Supreme Court scene.
Mhm.
They're arguing for stuff. Who are they arguing against? Nobody. It's self-indulgent, it's communist, it's crappy, and it's horrifying, and that's the joke. And that's
Yeah.
why I was like, and it's got this perspective of like, oh, it's like, how does the world function? How does an 8-year-old girl see the world? And
Yeah.
then over the course of that movie, more reality is coming into, and it's causing that perspective to grow up.
Mhm.
And then you find out, oh, it can, he goes to the world, he realizes that men have a bit more attention, they have a bit more wealth, agency. He's like, oh, I'd
Yeah.
like that. And then he goes to the worst area. He goes and finds all the terrible books of what it is to be a man, and then models that into Barbie. And he it works out well for everyone to have fun and happy, but it's also it's a very horrible fantasy version of
It
what
literally worked out
patriarchy is.
overnight for everyone in Barbie Land.
Yeah, but the thing is, it was also frighteningly, it was a mockery of what patriarchy is, and it hit both sides really well. And the thing is, like, again, if it was truly a woke film, it wouldn't have made over $1 billion because we've already known, we've tested it rigorously that woke movies do not make $1 billion at the box office.
Yeah,
Audiences were smart enough to realize that, and the combination with Oppenheimer really just that was the audience doing that Barbenheimer thing. No marketing company came up with that, and that just shows you how inept
and yet
marketing.
2 studios benefit from it. That's
exactly
the more amazing thing. All right,
but the thing is, it did that well because it's like, oh, we realize this is a female thing. We could target the females, but we already have a history of Barbie movies that have done that, and they performed decently well for what the budget was. We're going big studio. We need the male stuff. How do we do that? Well, let's make Ken the empathetic character of the story because guys will relate to that, and then just try and throw in as many jokes as you can. And oddly enough, it worked.
Yeah, it's funny.
I don't think it's going to work again, but it worked once.
Yeah. Well, it's funny if you ask the women in my life, they loved Ken, and that was the movie for them. So it even worked that ways. All right, let's continue on. From Nutty Squirrel 8 for $5. Thank you. The studios and condition people to take good word of mouth, as I'll have to watch it when it comes out on Netflix. Yeah, we just got word that Universal is going after theaters, and they forced theaters to put Fall Guy in for 3 weeks clean, meaning Fall Guy had to be in the main theater for 3 weeks. And what happened 19 days later, less than 3 weeks, it goes to streaming or goes to VOD.
It goes to VOD while it's still playing in theaters for the remainder of the season, which is weird.
Yeah. Well, but the fact that Universal made the theaters hold it for 3 weeks when they put it onto VOD in less than 3 weeks, meaning that they screwed over the theaters by doing that.
Oh, they did. The thing is that's also the frightening aspect I found, is that because Universal was so quick to throw this on VOD, they are basically saying that's where the audience is. That's where the market is now. It's going to be, people would rather stay at home and pay a monthly subscription fee to see almost as much and many movies as they can than, unfortunately, the journey and the expense that comes with theaters, because it's a weird Mobius strip, a snake eating its own tail effect, where you spend $100 million on a movie, you have to then throw it into theaters, and you have to negotiate with the theaters to keep it in there as long as possible to make up your money back.
Yeah,
and
you don't negotiate. They don't negotiate with theaters. Well,
they don't really negotiate. Some theaters have a little bit of negotiating room, but not much. But they basically just make that deal, and then the theaters realize, oh, well, we have to charge X amount of dollars to get people to make our money back so that we can actually make a profit on you showing this $100 million movie. And everything just kind of goes up and up and up. And as the expenses at the theater go up, and you have to then say, well, in order for people to justify going to the movie theater to spend the $15 to $20 a ticket, we need to make a more expensive film that has bigger effects, bigger things, bigger stuff to get them to come in. And it just keeps going and going and going. And it all started with the fact that the studios misunderstood an analysis report saying that if you as a studio spend $100 million a year on movies, you will make $1 billion. And they took that as, oh, if we spend $100 million on one movie, we'll make $1 billion. So logically, if we spend $100 million on 10 movies, we'll make $10 billion. And it's like, no, $100 million across your slate of the year will help you better your odds making $1 billion at the box office than throwing it all in one basket.
Yeah. Yeah, I bring my daughter into this because that's my only in with the teens now is through her. And I will tell you, what she tells me is that her friends like watching movies, but they have been conditioned to wait for streaming than they do going to the theaters. And it really has to be a special movie for them to want to go to a theater and see it. And it's sadly the things we've been saying are coming true. From Sean Z again for $1.99. Thank you. No more movies featuring sand for a few years. Okay. And Sean Z, hey Sean, you're doing the Lord's work here. $2.99 super sticker, and then also Sean comes in with this $1.99 content. Keep it coming. That's all I can say. Also, the streaming shows are low quality. That's definitely a perception. Someone was saying though that the top 10 movies on Netflix were theatricals. So it's interesting that it's that streamers are not necessarily creating their top 10 movies. It's still the theatricals. It's still the big studios. From
Yeah.
Pilgrim Media for 2, would Norman Lear thrive in today's Hollywood?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he
Because
would
he would
definitely
make
be doing things differently.
he'd be doing something that he wouldn't be doing something too different. He'd still be trying to push the edge, but he'd be trying to. He
Mhm.
understood that he has to grab your attention as quickly as possible and hold on to it with his shows. I don't see anyone like that around
Someone
these
said it
days.
like that. I mean, let's be real. Norman Lear is a liberal, a very classical liberal, and his
Old school,
shows
yeah.
were very liberal. But it had an appeal across the board. He was, and the reason I bring that up is his woke message was there, but he used comedy, he used storytelling well enough to get those points across, whether you agreed with them or not.
Well, the other part too is that there was nothing extreme about him. Like that's one of the caveats of
Mhm.
what traditional liberalism was. It's like we just want to see if this works, and then you looked over to the conservative side and be like, okay, what's their reaction? And gauging on their reaction, we can either tell, oh, okay, are we doing something good, or are we doing something bad, or are they just being, crazy?
Yeah,
And those three things are what you did. But for some strange reason, it just kind of it was a train that just left the station and went off the rails, and we don't know
right.
how it exactly
Well,
got there. And we have all these illiberal aspects that are posing as liberals, and no liberal and no conservatives calling it out, because some of the conservatives are like, well, if we keep on calling them all liberals, we'll then get more people on our side, and then we'll get to our way. And I'm like, that's an interesting power grab.
yeah,
And then the liberals are like, well, we don't want to be offensive to our own people, completely forgetting the fact that they're not that. They're their own thing. They're just co-opting the
right.
word. Um, and Norman Lear was really good at the storytelling, because what he was doing is he's like, listen, I've got this point of view and I'm going to have this argument, but in order to make that argument sound good, I need to have an equally stronger counter argument in order to create
Yeah,
conflict.
he needed to understand the other side of the argument, which is why Archie Bunker was such a great character, because they're, as racist and misogynistic as they wanted to portray him, there was a nuance to him that made you empathize with him. And that's the thing about it. If you're going to create a story that comes from a specific political standpoint, you need to understand the other side. You
Mhm.
need to respect the other side in order to tell the good story. And the problem with today is the other side are racist, misogynist, and we've written them off, and so we don't care what the other side has to think, and therefore have no respect for the other side.
They forget the adage, which is like, keep your friends close and your enemies even closer, which is that you should know your enemies just as well as
Mhm.
you know yourself, especially if they're on different political sides, because you're going to come to blows with them. And in story, that's kind of what you need. Story always has something of politic in it. And by politic, I mean the traditional politic, which is your point of view, your opinion. And your antagonist and a protagonist,
Mhm.
the reason we like watching stories with a protagonist and antagonist is because they're both at odds with each other, trying to accomplish a goal where one winning will supersede the other. And we want to see that drama. We want to figure out how is that going to play out, and what are the stakes and what are the consequences. And we don't have that so much anymore, because we have two generations, I'd argue, two generations of writers and creatives and directors
Mhm.
and studio execs that are like, it's better to deplatform the other side than to try and
Right.
argue against them. And it's like, that's not how you tell a story. The story is that you expose. I mean, Charlie Chaplin in the Dictator film, he understood what he was doing, and he was mocking it because he understood it so intimately well. And it probably horrified him to learn all that stuff to do so. But he made a great movie out of it. And that's kind of how you make your point, because as soon as 2016 happened, we got protests by people that I worked with who had "Not My President" on there. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not how this works, man. And if that's what you're doing, if you're doing a shutout, like you're a child in a temper tantrum and you're timing yourself out, um, you're not in the right industry. And
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, and I also heard a lot of what uh, I've never heard before was I don't need to argue my side anymore, and that was it. The argument's over, and the reality is you've got to keep arguing these things because there's so
Right.
much nuance, and people are getting this is where cancellation comes in. All right, we got to get through all these super chats here from John
Right away.
Lang, member for 22 months. Yeah, you've been here a long time, John. Furiosa was well acted by Charlize, but I agree. I was not interested in seeing any more of her after Fury Road. Fair enough. Um, Shinatsky 199. Thank you. Buffy caused a total disaster for women's characters. For women characters, Buffy caused it. Okay.
A lot of my colleagues were hugely influenced by Buffy the Vampire Slayer television show, along with Battlestar Galactica,
Mhm.
which I think are great shows on their own, but they're not something you should be emulating and copying.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was. Yeah, that's a long conversation there. All right, Cass again for 499 euros. Sorry, pounds. Sorry about that. Is there an art to understanding how to read a screenplay, being able to see it in your mind, rather than this person comes in and says something? Can you answer that real quick?
Yes. Nobody comes in and says something. They write a one-page summary. That's how it is. Like if you read the screenplay, you write a one-page summary, you hand it off to the exec. He has that read to him by his assistant or her assistant.
Yeah.
And that's how it goes. It's really pathetic.
Yeah. They're not reading it. That's what you're saying. All right. From Rajo. Okay. For 5 Canadian, I'd just like to get back to work after the strike and make good movies. Yeah. I mean, that was the dream. For Magna Defender 98 for $10. Iger and Hollywood as a whole keep blaming Cool for everything.
The Coof.
The Coof. Keep blaming the Coof for everything. I'm sorry, but 99% of society no longer cares about a 4-year-old cold. The crisis ended 2 years ago, and it's well past time. It's well past time to move on. Yeah, it's funny when I watch a movie now that has masks involved in COVID. It's like, oh, this feels old. You kind of shot yourself in the foot by leaning into that a little bit too much.
Oh,
and then finally from Jean Hu for 742. FYI, a snake eating its own tail is an Ouroboros.
Yes, Ouroboros. Correct. But a Mobius strip is also an Ouroboros. So yes, that you are correct, Zion Hu.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna transition here. We're gonna clear the deck. Give me 1 second here as we enjoy this little video. It's here somewhere. And there we go. Yeah, I don't know why I played that one, but we're going to move on. Someone in the chat asked, about why trailers are bad. And I was watching the Moana trailer this morning, and I just wanted to get your idea, because to me, this is a really bad trailer. And I want to bring this up and just get your opinions about it. And you've seen it already. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of, let's see, how do I get this up here? We're just gonna kind of take segments of it and talk about it and talk about why this is no good. So we'll start with this little opening scene. This is Moana 2. Okay. Yeah, I just want to talk about that for a moment. So this is your opening moments to Moana 2. You have a little crab there. He's in the shell. He needs a bigger shell, so he crawls out to this seemingly bigger shell. And then someone comes along, puts down their staff, and trades the shell. And then what amazingly happens is there's no payoff to that. We could continue on, but that was the opening. So here's the issue I have with that moment there. Why is it there? What is the why? Look, the little crab there. The why. There's the want and need of that little crab is I need a bigger place to live. And then this person comes along, Moana, and trades shells, and that's it. I don't get why. And
it's the save the cat moment.
What was that?
It's saving the cat moment, so to speak.
Yeah, but what's the cat in danger?
No, but there's two different methods. Like the one is you saving the cat's in danger, or you're helping out an underdog. In this case, the crab. The problem is that you're right. They didn't follow up with it anymore. It's just, here's what you would normally do. Like Pixar would traditionally, the crab would go in there, go into the new home. It would get up and then just scurry away, and it'd be a very cute little cutesy thing that they would do. and then you'd pan up to Moana, and she'd have the other shell or whatever. She'd add it to a collection or something to inform us of like what they were doing, and then you'd play it out from there. But this, I don't. This was like, this is our hero. They do good. They help other people, other things, other creatures.
She didn't help. It's one of those. The thing I learned when I was doing marketing in my in the real world, when I had a real job, was I would go in and I would change things, or I would submit artwork that I had done, and people would change things. And the comment that always came back, and the comment I always remember is, well, your change, it's different, but is it better? And in this case, here's a little crab who's chosen the shell, and then Moana comes along and swaps it out. She made it's different, but was it better? And that's the problem with that scene, is that it should illuminate, it should say something about the character Moana. And what I felt like should have happened there was that the little crab goes into the new shell and realizes it's not big enough. It's too small, and it struggles. Mm-hmm. And then Moana comes in and brings in the bigger shell. In this case, the shell wasn't even bigger. It was just shaped differently.
It was a cone.
It was a cone shaped, which maybe there was something in the first movie that alluded to that. I have no idea. But this is, to me, what this trailer that we're about to see in full is, that no one knows how to cut a trailer. And B, I fear for the Moana story, because I'm not sure we're going to get a good story in this. Any last thought on that? Just that one moment?
No, I think you kind of nailed it, because you'd want the little creature to get out of the shell, go into the other one, and realize it's not the same, and then shake it off, and then maybe have the original shell wash away, and now it's helpless, right? And then that's when you bring in the bigger shell, because you want to amp it up to be more empathetic. But
and that right there will say a lot about the character Moana. All right, let's go. Okay, so here's our majestic shot. The reminder that she is this great queen.
Okay.
Okay. So all this right here, this is the problem I've had with Disney, with Star Wars, with Marvel, is it's just a shot of pretty things, or seemingly pretty things. Yes. It says nothing other than, hey, you're about to get a visual spectacle here.
Well, that's because you've got a bunch of people that only understood the superficial aspects of the Disney classics, and not why those shots were the final shots in the trailer or the final shots in the film. Like, there's a reason why everything on screen is captured. And if you don't understand or try to figure out what that reason is, and you try to replicate it, you get this.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So we get a little bit of culture here, which is fine. Mm-hmm. Little reminders of the original movie.
That's cute.
Okay. What'd you say?
That is cute. I mean, it kind of works because it's a gimmick.
Yeah, but it's an old joke.
It is. It's not new.
It's not new. I mean, and I don't remember that relationship between Moana and Hey Hey here as being like that. I guess it was there, but again, this is a very old joke. And you just, it speaks to the fact that Moana 2 used to be a television show, and they cut it down to a movie, and now we're getting gags that a television show would have, and we put it into a movie. And that's just sad. It's like, it's fine. It's cute. A kid who's seen Moana for the first time will laugh, but how many times have you seen this joke? Too many.
Yeah.
Too many.
This is a call from the ancestors to sail to new skies and reconnect our people across the entire ocean.
Okay, so this is a call from the ancestors. That this is a call to reunite the people.
But we didn't see a call. That's the thing. Like, she's completing a speech that has no thesis to it. So we, as an audience, are now really confused.
Right. And fortunately this is short, but again, It's the story of this is basically Raya and the Last Dragon, where you have what the implication is there's a faction of people and they need to be brought together, and Moana is going to do that. Again, we've seen this story, we know this story, but we don't know exactly Moana's part in the story. We don't know her struggle in the story,
and we don't know why. The why is a trailer is supposed to present a question of this is at stake, and then it's not supposed to tell you how they're going to solve it. It's going to say, now these are the people that are being that are making the call to action to try and address this question, and that's it. It's the question and the characters, and if you can't make a proper relationship between those in your trailer, you're going to be very confused. You're not going to understand what's going on, and you're not going to remember anything about it to actually go back and see the actual film.
Yeah. All right, let's it's almost over. Yeah, call back the characters we loved in the first movie. Something majestic. And the title card.
Maui?
Boat snack. Oh, boat snack upgrade. Bacon and eggs. Why didn't you bring the pig last time?
Oh, okay, so lame joke. I don't know. Did you find it funny?
No, I found it very odd, kind of patronizing.
Yeah, but let me frame it this way. That felt like a line from a television show, from a Disney Channel television show.
Yeah. It's too kid friendly, and this is the other part too. This is the biggest flaw that a lot of writers, and this has been going on for generations, so it's not like a new thing. When you're writing for children, you're not really writing for children. You're writing for the age above what they are, because children are always growing up. So you if you're thinking, okay, I want to make a movie for 5-year-olds, you have to realize, okay, then I have to tell a story that's going to be about kids older than 5, or about topics that a 5-year-old hasn't yet reached but are appropriate for them to reach eventually. Sort of like, a great story is, what happens if an only child is going to find out they're going to be a big brother or a big sister to someone? That's a good type of story that's, that kids will grasp onto. The moment you try to write for kids at that age and keep them at that age is the moment they lose interest. They'll watch it once, and if there's a good musical number or something funny in there, they'll probably go on repeat for a bit, but then they will literally grow out of it and then look at it back as an older person with embarrassment, because it doesn't bring any extra.
You outgrow it. That's the problem with, that's how Disney was able to create classics versus what we're getting today. You outgrow it. Weirdly enough, I think Despicable Me is one of those shows that is stupid for children, but it's got those slapstick elements like the Three Stooges that appeals to adults, which is why I think that franchise has legs versus others. And here the biggest thing for me, and the trailers, I watch The Acolyte, I watch all these trailers that Disney's been putting out. There's no hook. There's nothing emotional for me to hook onto for this story to make me want to go and shell out money, carve out time in my life to see this movie. And this teaser trailer, and granted, it is a teaser trailer. Now all it's done is to say, "Hey, Moana's back, and all her friends are back." And therefore,
remember Moana?
Remember how much you love Moana? Look, you could have done this with. In fact, they did this with Star Wars. When A Force Awakens came out. The teaser trailer were just images full of nostalgia, and the teaser trailer was, "Hey, we're back," and people went nuts. That's all you need to do. You didn't need to tell anything about the story. You just need to bring images. And Hollywood, definitely Moana here, hasn't earned that right, not like Star Wars did. And that's it. I just go back to Disney and the fact that it's not the company it used to be. They used to be great at storytelling. They used to be great at advertising, at hyping things up. And the company has gone so far down that it's just forgotten how to do a lot of these things, because they got rid of all the old white guys who knew how to do it.
Yeah, they got rid of the veterans out of jealousy, animosity, and other ease. and they thought they could do better. And it's the arrogant of leaping before you look. And who pays for it? Well, Disney pays for it. We as an audience pay for it. But the question is like, how did we get there? Is it, I mean, studios are not smart enough to do something malicious, because that happens,
it happens over
by
time.
Yeah,
I mean, I covered this in the D files, because Wish was the culmination of this. It was when Wish came along, the 100th anniversary movie. At this point, the leadership had nudged out all the veterans, at least all the veterans who knew something, and the only veterans who were left were the ones who needed their jobs and just caved in to whatever demands were given to them, and they had no say in terms of well, they got rid of all the veterans who knew how to make a Disney movie, and when Wish came along and they wanted to actually make a Walt Disney movie, there was no one there who could tell them how to do it, and that's the movie you got. I mean, I'll say this. This comes from the Vancouver Disney Animation Studio in British Columbia. At least the visuals look like Moana. At least there are some actual artists there and people who know what they're doing. But the reality is the storytelling is still coming from Burbank.
Yes.
So
you're going to get possibly really good animation with a story written by people that are, again, they're not understanding Disney films or films in general. They're just taking a look at what they watched and copying that based on that alone. There's no in-depth association to it.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because there was a movie called Elio that Disney was working on. I believe it was pushed to next year, but that was supposed to have come out in May, this month. Instead, they repurposed the Moana TV show. Apparently, they didn't have the main actors, and so The Rock and Ariel Covalho, they're redoing all the lines, and they're rushing it out for November. Literally rushing it out for November, and then a month later, you're gonna have Mufasa, which is just the weirdest movie schedule that Disney has going on here.
Yeah, those are too close together. And the other part too is that if they have to rush it out, which means that even though the animation is being done in Vancouver, they're going to have to outsource tons of other studios to render those final files in order to meet that deadline, which means that this is going to have a massive end cost budget.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely going to be a lot of overtime, and quite frankly, from what I've been told through the D files, is that rushing animated features at Disney is common practice now. I think Wish was 6 months. This was certainly faster. I think it helped that a lot of this was already rendered when the announcement was made because they were working on the TV show. At CinemaCon, I got to see the opening number, the big number that opens the film, and it looked fine. The song was good enough, much better than Wish. But again, what are we watching? What is the story here? And if I know Disney, Moana's perfect. She has no fatal flaw, and she's going to reunite the people, and that's our movie.
And it's going to be effortless.
Yeah. Certainly there'll be a big bad guy, a big godlike bad guy. But
there has to be some sort of antagonist, like whoever imposed the curse was like, I don't want to get rid of the curse or whatever. I mean, to your point, the fact that Disney traditionally, if they knew that they're doing their centennial, they would have been working on Wish as early as 2008, and they would put the money in it and be like, we have to make this perfect because it's our centennial film. Like that's how Disney would have to have operated. That's how Eisner probably would have done it.
Yeah, that's how Lasseter would have done it.
Lasseter probably pitched it, and then it was taken away from him.
Yeah. There were original stories. I mean, the whole idea of the origin of When You Wish Upon a Star was definitely the catalyst of it all. But it was very different from the discussions from the start versus what the final product was.
Yeah,
especially when they talk about the fact that Kelsey Grammer was going to be the main old guy in the movie.
And then they replaced him with Chris Pine, right?
No, they replaced him with Victor Garber.
Victor Garber, right?
Yeah. All right, fellow Canadian. All right. Professor Fear says Moana 2, the Cankling. Cankling. All right. From Flav, Under the CO. Sia. Sia, yes. Scooter Tart. I found trailers in general are awful these days. All are bland, samey, and unimaginative. Yeah, it just feels like a visual feast of, just sparkling images.
There's only a handful of trailer production houses now. There used to be tons. There used to be subdivisions, subsections in every studio of their trailer department. Now it's outsourced to like a couple of companies, and they've got their model. And if you've got the footage that fits that model, they put the trailer together very quickly and they pump it out.
Yeah, I had my cousin. He did a lot of Disney Marvel trailers, and they just gave him the movie. Said, "Here's the movie. Make a trailer." And it was, he was working for a third-party house at the time. From Dominic Zelenak, Moana, a Mad Max saga. Yeah, I mean, they should do that. Yowzer79, the kids prefer anime. Disney should attempt to return to 2D to see if that resonates. Yeah, it depends on what you mean by 2D, because ultimately they're always going to do computer graphics. They're not going to return to ink and pen and ink.
No, yeah, 2D animation is still 3D models. They just film it for 2D. It's
and traditionally, even rushed, I believe a Disney film took 3 years to make, and rarely came in under that. From Jesse Abundis, Disney Logic, bad joke, goofy character to be made into a toy, bright colors, music, dancing. Don't forget the dancing. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's when Disney has turned itself into a formula, and that's the problem. From Neil, the writing is king always. Yeah, story will cover up a lot of imperfections.
Yeah, well, the phrase is concept is king. So if you have a good idea and you can execute it well, you're sailing well ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like we see some great low budget indie films, and what they all have in common is a good story, because that good story will overcome the low budget that film is restricted to.
Yep, always.
All right, and lastly, from Rod Cornholio. Hey, Rod. So many new Disney films are literally forgettable. Yeah. Remember Strange World? Came out 2 years ago.
Remember Tomorrowland?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. All right. Here, we're having such a good conversation. We're skipping some topics here. Let us, whoops, sorry, Lori. Okay, here we go. And then of course, we're going to entertain you with this video now.
Stop obsessing about race, you stupid, midget-minded moron.
Yeah, I must have said that. All right. So this is an article that came out in the LA Times last week. The reason I know about it is because the LA Times has been advertising this article to me, wanting me to subscribe to them. They gave me $1 for 6 months. I said, okay, for the sake of this one article, I'll spend the $1 and get 6 months of the LA Times. But this will be up your alley, because it's talking about we're a year after the strike, and where's the industry at? And I figured you were the best person to talk to this. But Company Town, we checked in with Hollywood writers a year after the strike. They're not okay. From
which Hollywood writers did they check in with?
we'll get there. From Chrissy Karras and Stacey Perman. For 14 years straight, Ted Sullivan was consistently paid to pen stories for the screen. The Hollywood-based 53-year-old television writer and producer's resumes boast credits on hit shows such as Riverdale and Star Trek Discovery. Hit shows like Star Trek Discovery. Okay. So now he spends 7 to 8 hours a day writing without pay, preparing for an unforeseen moment that Hollywood studios start greenlighting projects and hiring writers again. He misses the picket lines of the WGA strikes, which to him were the best thing to working in the writer's room, surrounded and supported by colleagues. You could hang out in front of the studios with your fellow writers friends and make it feel like the strike line.
Yes, you can.
He hasn't worked in a real writer's room since the strike began. I feel like I'm in the worst Twilight Zone ever, Sullivan said, where I wake up and I'm now 20 years older. Now I'm 20 years old again, writing spec scripts for free in my apartment. Does that resonate with you in terms of where you're at or where your friends are at?
That's always been that way. I'll put it to you this way. Everybody is always writing a spec script in their home for free because they're trying to get momentum. They're trying to use it as part of their catalog to land an open writing assignment or get a show. But I really like the fact that LA Times decided we're going to talk to a writer who worked on Star Trek Discovery in Riverdale. They're the problem. Those writers are the problem. And if they're the ones complaining, that is the best sign that Hollywood is on the mend, because those shows were terrible. The writing is horrific. A lot of the staff of that show were not writers that had skill, talent, understanding, pedigree, any of those things that make a show good. So if the LA Times is reaching out to those people and they're complaining, keep doing it, please, because this should be conveying to an astute audience that, oh, the writers of these terrible shows that are making things worse for everybody are not getting work. Isn't that like meritocracy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you're saying they've got to up their game.
They should have been. You always up your game. My first day, I was an intern, unpaid at Paramount. I got coffee. I had to check I had to literally check boxes that things were done and tasks were done in the studio lobby and whatnot. I was doing grunt work, but I was loving it because every time you'd be the new fresh voice. And so people would ask your opinion on stuff so they could gauge another perspective on the audience, and you had to deliver. And if you couldn't be insightful on that, if you couldn't show them that you were talented and good at what you're doing beyond just being an intern, you didn't make it anywhere. And that was the fun of it. It was basically saying, okay, kid, here's your shot. Show me what you got. And if you have to show them. But now we had a generation where it's not show me what you got. Is, oh, you look like this. Come on over. And now the people that look like this are being told, well, listen, you don't actually have any talent, and we can't fire you, but we're not going to renew your contract, and you're not going to be getting meetings because we're going to be looking for people that can make us money. And since you can't make us money, why would we hire you? And I think that's the fantastic sign. So yes, you can say, oh, cry, the Hollywood writers. It's like, no, the people that are crying are not Hollywood writers. They're writers. They're people who pretended to be Hollywood writers, and they fooled a lot of people, and now they're being exposed. And keep exposing, please.
Well, yeah, and when you had 600 projects going on, there were a lot of writers who were there. Let me see. I am a subscriber. Okay. Sorry, it's giving me all these subscriber things. Okay. A year after the Writers Guild of America members walked out in pursuit of higher wages, enhanced streaming residuals, and limitations on the use of AI, the Times checked in with multiple writers of varying experience. Some declined to be named to avoid risking future employment. Smart move. All said that they and their colleagues have struggled to find work over the last 12 months amid a contraction that has led to unstable production and employment levels across the entertainment industry. The so-called peak TV era that enabled 599 original scripted series. It was 599, not 600.
Oh, I'm sorry. My averaging was off.
To land in a single year is over, likely never to return. Film, television, commercials, and other production activities in the first quarter of 2024 was 20.5% lower than the 5 average, according to Film LA. Globally, film and television productions lagged by 7% in the first quarter compared to the same period last year. We're not seeing this V-shaped recovery in writer employment, said Patrick Adler, principal at Westwood Economics and Planning. So the idea was before the strike, you were up here. During the strike, it went down. And then what should have happened is this eventual creep up. But I believe
they didn't read the MBA.
That's not happening. That's what you're saying.
No, because they didn't read the MBA. I read it. I knew exactly what was going to happen when they did this. It's not going to be a V. It's going to be like my logo here. I'll show. It's going to be like that. You're going to have. We had the peak. We're at the decline. But you see the little bit at the end.
Hold on, let me.
The D that comes up. That's where writers should be and always should be. Toward that little rise at the end before it flatlines again. That is where writers should be. because what we had is an inflation of terrible writers, which is the peak between the S and the D of my logo. And then now we're getting them all purged out, which is at the bottom point of my logo. And now we're slowly rising up to a more stable land, because that is, that's where it always should have been. We've inflated our writing staff based on inappropriate metrics.
Mhm.
And the MBA has basically said, oh, we acknowledge that. We acknowledge that we have way more writers than we actually need. And we also acknowledge that way too many of them are terrible and should not have been in the business for the first place. So we're going to put in some stipulations to protect our industry from these types of people. So yes, if you want to be a diversity hire or whatnot, you still have to be a good writer first. And that's what they've done. And the fact that they're complaining to the trades is great, because that's telling me that it worked.
So this is a question I haven't asked you, but regarding the WGA strike, in your opinion, who won? Because
I did.
Feels like this pretty clear. You did.
I did, and writers like me won, because here's the thing. So since the strange event that happened in 2016, work for me has been in a massive decline. I mean, I would still get meetings. I would never be told directly why things wouldn't be moving forward and whatnot. But it just was like that. And I noticed it with other colleagues, people who are much more better writers and talent than I am, also in the same situation. Then the writer's strike happened. I saw the MBA. I'm like, this is actually a really good deal. I've never seen anything like this before. I'm surprised. It goes into effect. Then in November, I start getting emails and texts from people that have not talked to me in like 7 years. And then just this past winter, I got an option for a screenplay that was so bad and was trying to take advantage of me. I knew Hollywood was actually repairing itself, because I couldn't even get that far before this MBA strike. So the fact that I've got skeevy producers reaching out to me to try and essentially steal my work for very low pay means that Hollywood is actually on the mend. And it's going to be a long time before it gets back to normal. But the fact that they're going after a guy like me, a straight white man who happens to have a background in sci-fi and genre entertainment, and not going after, a person like what's being interviewed in this article, shows that, they're like sick and tired of not making money. And they're going for people that they know can actually make the money, that can actually do stuff. That is the best sign that you can have. Like, not everybody is getting those opportunities. It's bleeding out. Like, they're testing the waters, so to speak, right now, the studio system. And it's going to be a long time before it kind of resets. In fact, I think we'll probably have the WGA contract will have to be renewed again before we start seeing a change in that case. And guess what? A lot of those members are probably going to want to go on strike because they're not getting work. And the WGA union right now, with the current people that I'm aware of that in there, are not going to propose a strike motion for that reason.
Well, they may not be working to the point that they're not going to be paying their dues, and they may be out of the union by then.
Yeah, well, I mean, the union is kind of a mixed up aspect, because even though I didn't make my units during the pandemic and whatnot, I'm technically a member, but not a member, even though I was like an associate member. It was really complicated, and the fact that I'm a Canadian citizen just further complicated itself. But I still get access to a lot of WJ things. Regardless, this was. I don't know who exactly orchestrated it. Some suspect it's Ellen Strutzman over at the WGA, who's just was promoted to the newer, higher position. But somehow they maneuvered literally we need to clean out the fridge of our union and our staff, and everything that's rotted and not working is gone, and all the vegan stuff is going out too, because it doesn't actually nurture us, and the soy is gone, and we're just getting the meat and potatoes back in.
You gotta get that meat back
in the fridge so that we have our nutrients and that can actually like feed ourselves. So yeah, I mean, I've never expected that to happen. Not in a place like California with those extreme politics and whatnot, but they did it. And whether it sticks or not, it will depend over the next couple of years. I think next year we're going to probably see we're going to see less television shows, but they might be of a slightly higher quality. And if they can hook an audience, we will grow from there, because it's all right now about just getting ad revenue in to support the rest of the industry, which the studios, not the writers, not producers or directors, the studios nearly killed television and streaming in one go.
Well, I mean, ironically, what are people watching? Old good television shows.
Exactly.
All right. So the slowdown did not originate with the work stoppage of 2023. Writers and other entertainment workers began noticing a decline in unemployment and employment opportunities long before the strike. Following the so-called streaming wars, when companies spent exorbitant amounts of money to direct-to-digital content to compete with Netflix, studios dramatically slowed their pace. The television networks have been purchasing far fewer shows, and only from big names, says Jess Meyer, known for The Flight Attendant. You need cachet to even sell. The studio cost-cutting strategy has left writers in a pinch. As a viewer, what is there to watch? Well, there's a lot to watch.
599 shows, apparently.
Yeah. How can they make nothing? Even producers saying, let's wait until the right moment. I don't know what that means. So not to go through this rest of this, but what it seems like studios are doing is they are slowing down and letting the revenue of the work they've already produced kind of flow in before they really start putting on the gas and start making new content. Does that sound right?
Yeah, they're trying to gauge how much money are they making with what they have right now, and then what do they need to change to make more, and how are they going to enact that change? It's actually a surprisingly responsible approach to it. Yes, it's going to hurt some writers that can't get work, but if they do it well, which is again a crapshoot at this point, it means more work in the future. So you just have to weather it.
Well, it also helps that they can now get writers at a lower price, and if the show takes off and makes more money, then they can take money off of that end of things to pay the writers more.
Well, the thing is, like, the budgeting is kind of is stable, which means that if I got staffed on a show, I'd be making a very good living on that show. I'd even be making more of a good living if it performs very well because of the residual based stipulation. The studios would also be making a lot of money too. The question being is, like, are the studios going to go back to a 22 episode season, which is what the writers want? Or are they going to still do these miniseries with the 6 episodes, 8 episodes, 9 episodes, straight to order type of thing, and then you're out of a job until you find another one? And so that's like 3 or 4 months of work, and then you're back hustling again. The whole idea with the NBA is, like, we want to make those miniseries too expensive for the studios so that we get to the more stable 22 episode season order show. It was literally saying something that had been not in writing since television began, but was always assumed this was the model, and saying, no, we're putting this model in writing now. They use the smartest tactic either, which is like, oh, you want to do a 6 episode streaming series? Well, it's going to be really expensive, but it was to be cheaper if we did 22 episodes. And obviously the producers are going to be like, well, we're going to go with the cheaper option. And then that's what you do. And that's how you game the system. And again, like, I think that's a good sign. That's the right direction to go. Whether Hollywood nails it, again.
Yeah, or whether they're willing to be that patient. I mean, one of the things we said about the 22 episode season was when Kenobi came out. It was what, 8 episodes all written at the same time versus a 22 episode season where you write a few episodes and you can gauge the quality and the audience acceptance of that show, and and you're allowed to tweak over the 22 episodes, tweak it so that the show in effect should become progressively better by the time you get to the end, which was the problem.
You have your first 13 to gauge the audience. You figure out what they like. And then as the data starts coming in, before you go to camera with your subsequent following 9 episodes, you then make the adjustments to fit into that audience demographic. Oh, people really like this character that only appeared in 1 episode in that first 13 episodes. Can we bring that character back for a couple of epissodes here, see if that still works? And if it does, great. We've got a new actor and a new cast member on the show that's going to bring in audiences and allow us to keep working. You don't get that when you shoot a show before you air it.
We talked about, like, She-Hulk was the great example of that, because you had potential in those first 3 episodes, especially with the character of Madison. But Madison appeared in 2 episodes and was gone, and the best character in that whole show is now gone, and no one knew how great that character was. Also, you realized how bad the comedy was, and the fact that if you made certain tweaks, you could have actually stuck the landing with She-Hulk.
It pains me because I've read every She-Hulk from its first issue to the end of the John Byrne run, and and then there's rumors that Taylor Swift is going to be the blonde bombshell, which is her name is she's actually, as an old woman, Jessica Walters' assistant in those John Byrne things, and she teaches Jessica Walters how to break the fourth wall. And I'm like, if they did that in She-Hulk series TV show, it would have been fantastic. It would have worked, but I don't know what direction they went. They went in a crazy direction. The fact that I wish I was able to write that show, because you guys would have loved it.
Well, we were talking because the writer of Megan, the killer doll movie, black female, and I'm like, that would have been perfect for She-Hulk. To kind of bring that sensibility to it, the comedy and the horror. You feel like at least there's someone talented enough to who could have gone into that show and checked off a lot of boxes at the same time.
And Megan did well because the woman who wrote it knew how to write it. The director knew how to nail it. I think the weakest part was the adult, played by what's her name?
Was it Maya Hawke, or was it?
I think it was Maya Hawke. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, listen, the people that fit those demographics, there are writers that are out there. They're not at the level that they need them to be yet, but they're a good start. So don't drag them ahead to the finish line before they're ready, because then you're just going to ruin the very person you're trying to promote. Like, just get them in one step at a time. I had a great friend who's a black guy. He got it. We were up for the same job up in Toronto. He got it. He found out he got it because he's black. He was really upset by that. They would never listen to him. They'd never take his, he had an authority, in air quotes. And he eventually just quit because he's like, I was only there to be a trophy for the executives. And he's
the
like,
token.
And here's the thing. He was a better writer than me, and he's actually quit the writing industry altogether. He's doing customer service or something now. It's a shame, but that's what the institutions did and they've probably been doing it to several dozen, or if not hundreds, of other writers as well. Horrifying.
Yeah. All right. Another studio source who was not authorized to comment said the pullback was necessary because the TV production boom was simply unsustainable. Factors such as rising production costs, the lack of competitive film and television credits in California, and a shrinking ad revenue certainly plays into that. But the contraction is a return to normal more than anything else. Also, what wasn't there was COVID consultants as well as DEI consultants, which I'm sure the more and more I look at these DEI consultants, the more I believe it. They're all grifts.
Yes,
they're all people. Their jobs exist solely to find things wrong, and by God, they're going to find something if it kills them. And we could go on about that. Here's the most interesting thing. Speaking of DEI, that I want you to comment on. The shrinking business has also been particularly challenging for writers from underrepresented groups. Aiko Little, a early career writer who serves as the vice chair of the WGA's Native American and Indigenous Writers Committee, said that they began to notice a dip in employment opportunities near the end of 2022. During the peak TV era, writers in little circles encountered more openings than usual thanks to projects centered on Indigenous characters, such as FX's Reservation Dogs and Peacock's Rutherford Falls. More recently, Little observed it has been difficult for Native American and Indigenous writers to secure jobs beyond occasional documentary or revisionist Western. I mean, there's so much to comment here. You were hired because you were Native American. The thing that comes out to me is that because you're Native American, you can only write Native American characters and Native American stories, which now limits you and quite frankly is racist.
Yes.
It says something that if all you could do is write about your culture and not write beyond that, then that's why you don't have a job.
It's true. And the other part too, the reason that they get writers of that demographic to write those types of shows is to literally combat any of the blowback from people that would assume racism. It's like, well, I don't like how the Native Americans were portrayed in this movie or television show. Well, it's written by Native Americans, so you want to tell them how to express their culture, go right ahead, white person or whatever Karen they are. That's one of the reasons they do it. The problem being is that just taking a look at Aiko Little's little syllabus here, at no point did they mention what she worked on, or of any. What did she work on that was good?
Well,
or revered
Reservation
or not?
Dogs and
No, she said
indigenous-
TV shows like FX's Reservation
like-
Dogs, Brother Falls. So we don't. She said circles are encountering more openings than usual to projects centered on indigenous characters. So she's not even working on these 2 shows that are being mentioned. If we don't know what she's working on, then she's a person. She's a normal starting out writer. Let her work her way up to a pedigree and credits. Don't try and say that it's so hard to work. It's like, yes, it's hard for everybody at your level to work. Doesn't matter of your appearance. If you can make them money, they will come after you.
Yeah, I'm curious about these writer committees. I mean, are you part of the white guy writers committee at the WGA?
It's not official, but yes. Like we don't have meetings because every time you go to lunch with another writer, it's and it's usually a white guy or a white girl. That's our meeting for.
Yeah, because my understanding is that the WGA has a lot of these writers committees.
Yeah,
and it feels like the impression I get, because I'll go on the D files with the women animators committees, but it's not about animation. It was about securing your place and being seen in your job, and that it was never about making you a better writer.
That's how you get seen in your job, is if you're a better writer. Like that's the only way you ever get noticed, is when you do your job very, very well. Like that's how it works.
Yeah, I was at CinemaCon. I was at a luncheon for John M. Chu, who did I think of Step It Up 2. He did Crazy Rich Asians, Into the Heights. Mm-hmm. He's doing Wicked right now, but he talked about becoming a director and getting into the directing game, and he talked about how it was intentional on his part to not do Asian movies, to be seen as a competent mainstream director, and that no matter what was given to him, he was going to direct it. And that's where he started with Step It Up 2. Mm-hmm. You just got to get in there and you got to do the job. And he became competent to the point where, he had done so much work that the studio came to him and basically said, or people came to him and said, what project do you want to work on? And that was, he never thought about it, but it was like, oh, this is my chance to do an Asian project. And that's where Crazy Rich Asians came from. And it would make a lot of sense if everyone kind of took that route of just get your foot in the door, become a great writer. And by becoming a great writer, you can move on and do, these vanity projects, these cultural projects that have been on your heart for a very long time. And you'll probably get a lot more legitimacy in that. I mean, Crazy Rich Asians did pretty good.
It exploded, and it was a fun film that a lot of people really liked. And I agree with that. It's always about how much and how well can you deliver. You start small on the little things and you work your way up, because then people realize, okay, you understand the basics. Number 2, you can also make something really big out of something really small, which is even better. And as long as, because again, Hollywood doesn't like people with diverse skills. They love diversity, but they don't like people who can do more than one thing. They don't like the fact that I can do writing, I can do casting, I can do editing, I understand how to do props and set decoration. Like, I know all of these things well. They helped me become a better writer. I learned them because I wanted to be a better writer. I wanted to be able to say, okay, if I'm doing an open writing assignment, they're telling me that the budget is $70 million. I have to write a story that can fit within that budget. I need to know how much things cost. So I have to learn those other departments to understand what the general prices are and then factor that into my writing. They are restrictions, but I can have a lot of fun with that because I can use them in interesting ways to kind of outshine my competition. That is something that Hollywood doesn't like, because representatives don't understand how to market you, and then people don't know what they're getting out of you when they hire you. And it's like and it's a weird thing here, because up in Canada, I can go into not so much these days because it's still very much a woke issue going up here, but I could go into any one of the smaller little production houses with those skills and be like, great, we can actually hire you, and we can hire you across 3 jobs. So you get 3 salaries to do these 3 things on a project, because we need someone that can do that. And because you're doing all 3 of them, you can coordinate with yourself. So everything's in sync and it makes things really easy. And they love that.
Yeah.
For some reason in California, they hate that type of stuff.
Well, yeah, part of it also is that you can do those 3 jobs in Canada, but they'll pay you in Canadian dollars. So
Yeah, but it's 3 salaries, so it kind of balances out.
yeah, it'll get up to 1 American salary. And, it just, yeah, I mean, I could go into my life as a minority here in the United States, but I never felt like I need to go in somewhere and saying, oh, I'm the Asian this or I'm the Asian that. I knew I had, I knew being the only Asian. I'll just throw my improv career into this. There weren't a whole lot of Asians when I entered, and I knew I had to work harder than everyone else. But quite frankly, I'm glad I did, because I understand improv comedy much better than most people do. And look, hell, I wanted to be the best improviser I could possibly be, the best improviser. I wanted to be a standout player in every troupe I was ever part of. To me, that's a good goal. And if being Asian, forcing me to do that, made me do that, then fine. That's how I did it. But
you bring up a great point, though, because you often hear the argument of anyone claiming diversity. I had to work harder to get noticed. It's like everybody has to work harder to get noticed. It's immaterial of your exterior. You think that because there's some sort of ethereal notion that this is the case, but the reality is the fact that if you aren't working your butt off to get where you want to be, then you don't deserve it. And you don't have to say, I have to work twice as hard or whatever. It's like, you're not working twice as hard because you're a woman. You're working twice as hard because you want this more. And if people are getting it and they're not working as hard, well, then that's nepotism. And that's something out of your control, which no amount of work is really going to circumvent. But you should always be trying to work your best if you have a goal in mind.
Yeah, man, that's anybody. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter what alphabet letter you choose. This is the thing that frustrates me about the industry today, is this idea of excellence is no longer pursued. This Moana trailer, the Moana trailer, there should be excellence behind it. Everything Disney has always been that symbol of excellence, and we've lost that in almost all aspects of movie making. It is the rare director that strives for excellence to the point of of going mad and crazy. Christopher Nolan, for one thing. I never thought I would like Oppenheimer, but he put so much work into it and told such a great story that it was like, okay, you won me over with this thing. Excellence.
Mm-hmm. No, the pursuit of excellence is something that was very uniquely American, and it was something that I always was attractive to. And then to find it slowly being deteriorated because, well, it's too hard. And here's a lot of low-hanging fruit where you can get not the same amount of rewards, but you can get really close. And it's like, if that's the direction, I mean, what does that say for the spirit of entertainment in general?
Yeah, because you would think that you have to believe that putting out something with excellence will actually make money.
Yes,
weird.
And the brilliant thing is, like, nobody knows what excellence is. You just kind of feel it, and you got to take a shot. And that's one of the things that I liked about the entertainment industry, whether it's books, whether it's television, whether it's film, is the fact that you just want to. You have an idea, you have a story you want to tell, you love the story, you think other people are going to love it, and you hope they do, but you take the shot. And if it works, everybody's happy. If it doesn't work, well, you learn from it. And instead, what we've had is things don't work, and so people are throwing blame around. And back in the day, the stories that I used to hear from the veterans of Hollywood was like, yeah, there's some blame thrown around, but at the same time, it's like, well, what are the positives that we got out of this? Okay, well, let's focus on that and not so much on the negative. And now it's like it's all about the negative.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Company Town, global film and TV production down 7% following strikes, report says. Some seasoned writers remember the start of the streaming revolution as a boon for writers. One screenwriter who spoke anonymously to protect job opportunities compared the advent of streaming to the arrival of Uber, when it seemed like anyone with a car could make a decent living on their own schedule. I don't know how, if you worked in writers' rooms, but that was the sense that the sense going into the strike was it felt like anyone can write. And that, that's, I think, where you got the influx of DEI, diverse candidates who were just hired on because they checked a box and not because of the quality at all.
Yeah, it was part of it. It was weird. It was twofold because there's a desperation. We got these streaming services. We need to have content on there that brings people to watch it. So we have to start pumping out a ton of shows in order to meet that content expectations, which was the dumbest thing I thought of, because it's like a streaming service. Netflix is essentially an archive. It's the video store on digital. You go there to see the stuff that came out already that you want to go revisit. The studios should have figured out that's what it was, and then be like, oh, we have decades of television shows that are not really airing regularly on syndication. We're not making any real money off of it, except for on some of the minor foreign sales that we do. Why don't we just put that on the streaming platform so that people want to watch all 20 seasons of Gunsmoke? They can. And then you throw in a commercial ad to it. You start making money off of it again, because what is old is new. Every 50 or 40 or 50 years, everything old is new again. That is what the streaming platform should have been for the studios. But instead, they're like, nope, we're just making it. We're just going to make it like Netflix's original stuff for ourselves. So they're spending money, they're throwing it on their platform, and they're not selling it to anyone else to make additional money off of. And they basically are just like burning cash, where they should have been saying, oh, streaming market should have been the final destination of the distribution window set.
Like the DVD and VHS market.
Exactly. Like
that you made something that was so great when it hit theatrically, that it even got greater when it finally ultimately landed on streaming.
On streaming on streaming, because here's the other part too, and I remember this very well in the early 2010s. I knew people that had literally started running out of space in their home for all the DVDs they'd buy. And it's like, man, if only there was a way we could actually compact this into something that I could is spacious. Well, guess what? Streaming solved that. But at the same time, they also killed their DVD market because they didn't work out. Where it's like, oh, now I don't have to buy everything. I'm always going to have it on streaming, but I can buy the stuff I really want, the things that I really want to get, like the behind the scenes, all the special features. Those things I'll buy, and the things that I like a lot, I can just subscribe to the streaming service and always have them there
for easy access. So you're not, because I'm literally combing through 500 disc books to find movies, because I had to get rid of all my clamshells and all my DVD covers because there's just no room for it.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll go on. I had another great point. I can't remember it. Eventually, they started to change. Writing staffs and the paychecks began to shrink. Hiring process became more demanding and expensive. The companies requiring job candidates requiring job candidates to participate in pitch competitions, prepare elaborate PowerPoint presentations, hawking their ideas, the screenwriter said. It's not enough to go in with a pitch, said Chuck Rose, 20-year veteran of several television shows, currently working on an Amazon series. It has to be based on intellectual property, and networks want them with an actor attached. So there are two things here: is this pitch competition, and the other thing is apparently Amazon doesn't even want to consider anything original, and that you should already have a great actor attached to your project. Does that? Yeah. What do you think?
It's always been like that. Especially if you have your own screenplay, it's like if you can get an actor or director attached, that gets you 4 or 5 steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, I mean that's the state of independent film right now. If you have a script and you want to get it made, the best thing you can do is find an actor who'll do it, and then pitch it from there.
Exactly. Preferably an actor that's got a little bit of a reputation or name. Preferably an actor that is where the project itself is allowing the actor to stretch their skills. That's the great thing, because actors love being able to stretch their skills, to show them what they can do, because they want those coveted awards. What Chuck Rose here is saying is like, dude, I've been doing that for 20 years. Where the heck have you been? What opportunities have you had where you haven't had to do that? Where you haven't had to put together a presentation? Where you haven't had to do something that's beyond an elevator pitch? Because if you haven't after 20 years of working, then I'd have to say you're probably part of the problem and not the solution.
I mean, are your pitches like, do you have an elaborate PowerPoint going with you? Or
if I have to, like most of the time I do a general like elevator pitch, and that gets them excited enough. And if they say, hey, can we get some visuals? That's when I go to invest in visuals. I'm not going to invest in visuals prior to that, because it's foolish to do so. You're wasting money or wasting time. Ideally, you want to make sure, oh, I've got this pitch. I've written the script. I think it's great. I'll pitch it. If I can get a buzz out of that, or if I can get like a wide-eyed reaction, then I know, okay, I'll have to start prepping a pitch deck, which would be a PowerPoint presentation with some visuals, some images, and some summaries and cast ideas. Sometimes if it's a television show, I'll do a 6-page Bible of where I want to go, what cast members I think of and whatnot, and I send it out there. Usually do it stylized to fit the genre and tone so that you can convey that to them. But you have to do it in very short pieces of work. I know a lot of people that before they even know if the idea is good, they do a huge elaborate pitch deck and they start throwing in cast members and people they haven't even talked to yet, though they'd be interested, that they're hoping just to try and do it. Taika Waititi famously made a music video for Thor Ragnarok, and that got him in with Marvel. So those are the things you have to do. You've always had to do things of that nature to try and get your stuff sold. I don't know what Chuck is talking about here or what fantasy he's living in.
Okay. Even when the streaming business appeared to be booming, industry leaders had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, said one studio executive who was not authorized to comment. I think when the pandemic started, the fear became more real. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone who follows the business. The TV and streaming industry consolidated means writers will continue to struggle to find buyers. A major setback for writers was Nexstar's Media Group's 2022 takeover of the CW network, previously considered a haven for up-and-coming storytellers seeking steady work and upward mobility. So the article will go on to the point that the CW was bought out by Warner Brothers through the Nexstar Media Group, and the plan is to turn CW more into a sports network than the traditional YA television show. And so that goes to say that that opportunities are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking.
Yes, because so the CW started off as the WB originally, and then when it partnered with CBS for UPN to create the CW, it turned away from being a teen angsty show, a network for teen angsty shows, and it was actually the testing grounds for writers. And it was supposed to be, you start on a CW show, that you work on it for like 1 or 2 seasons on a show, and then you pitch your own show on another network and actually elevate your career. However, the CW shows were so terrible, and the writing selection, staff writers that they're selecting were so bad, they ended up sticking around for years and sticking within CW for years, to the point where they're just producing more and more shows. And if you were part of the checkbox writer group, you most likely got hired at CW. For one of the shows that they're doing.
I think the analogy here is you were growing mediocre food, mediocre crops. By getting a job at the CW, you had a job, but you weren't necessarily improving your craft.
No, you weren't. In fact, you guys did that sensitivity read. One of the writers on that sensitivity read thing was a CW writer, and they suck. And the thing is that was the place to go where you've got your reliable income. And Greg Berlanti, who is one of the big producers at the CW, really fostered and built that up. And there's a reason he was quite revered, because if you wanted to get your start, that's where you would go. And if you checked his boxes, you would be staffed on the show for a few years. And then if you wanted to go off and do your own thing, you could. But guess what? Every person that left one of those CW shows to go do their own thing never got a show off the ground.
Yeah. Okay. So here was the great point I was trying to make earlier, but what was happening was that it became this pursuit for titles, that these DEI writers, these diversity writers, they just needed one title. That I wrote one episode of Rick and Morty. You may not have written the episode, but you are the credited writer of the episode. We heard stories from Jim Agnew, who talked about, he had a script and they wanted to bring in a diverse writer to co-write it, even though he would write it all, but they wanted to bring in a diverse writer to co-write it. And that diverse writer now got the title. He didn't do it, but the point was that writer would have gotten the title and then could have gotten a better job just having the title, even though they had never done work. And that's what I feel like happened with Marvel and with Disney, is that they needed these diverse writers and directors. And so they got these people who had written a single episode of Rick and Morty and then put them on Strange World, which is what happened in that case. But their credit is only one episode, and I seriously doubt that they wrote the episode.
No, because most staff writers get rewritten by the showrunner or the showrunner's writer's assistant,
or the staff altogether, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean that's the case. I mean, I've guested in writers' rooms where I was hired for like the 1 episode contract, and I just come in and I just punch up an episode, and then I'd hand it over, and this showrunner would look at it, be like, okay, I like these, and I'm going to rewrite this. And then that's it. You get your paycheck and then you leave. And those are like rare opportunities because again, the WGA accepts it, but they don't 100% like it because they ideally want you to be staffed on the show. And usually it's a testing ground where if you're good enough, you get staffed or, you solve a problem. But a lot of the times I ended up meeting showrunners that, there were new showrunners. They were not very good. They got there through not the best of merit. And yeah, so when you're writing something that, a couple of producers say, wow, you should be the showrunner. It's like, well, you're the one that's in charge of the show. How about you hire me? It's like, we can't do that right now. There's, budget things. And it's like, there's other
you're
reasons
white.
to do. Well, they will never say that directly to my face, but there's always those types of things. In which case, if someone offered me a showrunner job, be like, I've never been a showrunner before. Please just put me on staff so I can learn first for a few years. Yeah. Then I'll consider that because there's so much responsibility. I remember when Max Landis became showrunner for Dirk Gently. And I'm like, he's not prepared for that. And then the Dirk Gently show, because kind of mediocre.
That was such a disappointing show. I was looking so forward to that show. I just like, this is garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the rest of the article goes on just about the contraction of the industry. Here it talks about writers who have to now flipping furniture or waiting at restaurants, things like that. We got to kind of end it there. But I mean, that's kind of the thing that I brought up about in the D-Files when they brought in all these women through women in animation. At their disposal were the Disney veterans who could have taught them to be great animators. But instead, they held on to their DEI status so much that they got rid of those old white guys with the wisdom and shoved them out the door. And so they didn't even come in with this idea of, I could better myself. I could become a better animator if I listen to people who have been doing it for decades. And it feels like it's happening here all over again.
It really is the case. And it's the one thing that, I mean, that's how the generations worked. I mean, rarely do you get someone who's like the best in the business and they don't want to share how they're the best, because there's some that are like, oh, we're afraid of the competition. No, the best in the business are not afraid of any competition. That's why they're the best, but they're happy to share what they've learned and shepherd the next generation because they know they're going to retire or die and not be writing stories anymore. And they love the genre or the medium so much that they want what they learned to continue on. For anyone to come in and reject that notion is detrimental to the entire function of what story is supposed to be and do. And it's upsetting to when you read the D-Files and you find out that they came in, they just cared about working for Disney. They didn't care about making Disney movies.
Yeah. They again, it's this idea of excellence that I'm coming in here to better myself over time, to learn from the masters and to pass that on to the next generation. And unfortunately, Disney is in a spot where it's definitely not passing on Walt's legacy to the next generation. Okay, we gotta wrap things up, but we're gonna go through our chat here real quick.
There's one thing in the private chat that the producer put in. You might want to take a quick gander at. That's kind of interesting.
Let's see. What is it? Nelson Peltz sold all his Disney stock. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, may not be making money for him. Yeah. Well, I'll actually on to build on that. I'll be on That Park Place tomorrow morning, and I'm pretty sure we'll be talking about that.
That'll definitely be the subject for them. Yes.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about the Moana trailer too. I've got some insight into the leaders behind that one as well. All right. So Andrew Cram gifted 10 Film Threat memberships. Thank you so much, Andrew, for that. Jeremiah says, yes, maybe they shouldn't be writers. They should work in HR instead. I mean, that's the harsh reality. If you're not good at your job, you're not excelling at your job, maybe you need to think about a different job. Or maybe you should think about getting better at your job.
Yeah, right. There's lots of ways. I offer a Patreon to help people get better at writing if they need it.
I mean, the tools are there. You can learn. You can become better at what you do. It's all on the internet. All right. From Professor Fear, this guy wrote Star Trek Discovery and thought, hey, I deserve more money. That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, you may not like Bass Reeves, but it was the highest viewed original series on Paramount Plus, which means it did better than Star Trek. So,
It did better than Yellowstone.
Yeah, did better than all of them. Tyler Sheridan was okay. Film Watcher 96. This guy is not script doctor. He is the fact doctor, because man, spot on.
Oh, thank you.
That could be your next channel. Bill S. Preston, Esquire. The WGA strike of 07 and 08 accelerated the broadcast network push to unscripted shows like reality shows. If you make the labor more expensive, you buy less of it. And interestingly enough, even reality shows are too expensive to make.
No, the good thing is the reality shows were taking off prior to 07, 08 because it started with Survivor. And what happened is that it kind of doubled during the strike, and then it kind of leveled out. And people
who wants to be a millionaire?
People wanted to say, "Oh, well, it's the unscripted reality shows are a result of the strike." It's like, no, that happened first, then the strike, and then Hollywood tried to punish the writers by continuing to do it. And then they saw, oh, the ratings decline. Ratings are declining on reality, and the expenses going up. Now we're going to get into original shows, and what they end up doing is on the streaming side of things is getting up to 599 shows in a single year, as opposed to better budget controlled entertainment.
Well, also, from an artistic standpoint, reality shows became less about reality shows, but more staged reality. And I think that's people start getting wise to that. And also, there was too much. It was just too much. And what was it? The diminishing returns. Survivor's the tops, and everything else is just diminishes from there.
You got American Got Talent, and what is it? The Masked Singer. Like those. Yeah, those are
American Idol. Yeah, Yowzer 79. The D-Files info surprised me with the writers trying to decide what lessons to teach in their work. You can't force an objective audience interprets the show as they wish. They can't be controlled.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Yeah, read the D-Files, please. For Patrick Lemire, She-Hulk based on classic comic would be a monster hit. Yeah. That's the thing that I this idea that you buy a popular IP, and yet you don't produce what made that IP popular in the first place.
Yeah, you don't replicate the essence of what made it work, because that's what you're doing is you're trying to just replicate the essence and tell a new story. Because again, people are fine with adaptations word for word and whatnot, but if you can tell them a new story that complements the original,
right,
and also maintains the essence, that's even better, because now you've got two products that you can sell, not one product you're selling twice.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question you always ask, or what you should ask when you buy an IP or do a sequel. What did people love about the first movie? And then replicate that. Keep it in there. And that's where a lot of sequels fail, is they forget why people like the original in the first place. All right. Patrick Lemire also says, narcissism makes people think their struggle is worse than anyone else's. Their ego won't let them believe maybe they just suck. Yeah, I talked about that. When I was growing up, I experienced actual aggression, and now I'm faced with microaggression. And believe me, I can handle microaggression. We've come a long way, and it's politics that keeps us from recognizing that, and it's a shame. All right, from Aaron Charman. Let's see. I saw the Beach Boys documentary on Disney Plus. Other than their music, I didn't know much about them. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for the recommendation. Yeah, the Beach Boys documentary is amazing. Like I said, it's not like all the other Beach Boy documentaries, which are really Brian Wilson documentaries. This
one has John Stamos in it?
No, John Stamos wasn't even in it. Yeah, but they all turn out to be Brian Wilson documentaries. And look, Brian Wilson is a genius, and he deserves to be remembered as a genius. But there were a lot of other guys in that band who were, it was a family band basically, and those insane harmonies that came out of the Beach Boys gave them that signature sound that hasn't been replicated. Definitely go see the Beach Boys documentary. I believe, it was put out by Frank Marshall, who happens to be married to a Disney executive. So, All right. Well, let's see. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Script Doctor. I appreciate you being here. This is a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, me too, man. Honored as always to hang out with you guys and listen and see what the chat is saying and talking about these fascinating subjects. I know a lot of people want to say, haha, writers are suffering. It's like, no, haha, the bad writers are suffering.
So yeah, give us your socials and how we can reach you.
Yeah, you can see me on various channels on YouTube, such as Film Thread, rarely on occasion, but I'm always happy to be here. Midnight's Edge After Dark. I have my own channel, youtube.com/scriptdoctor, and you can find me on Twitter X at scriptdoctorphd, where I share my musings and thoughts as well. And I also have a Patreon where I do screenwriting lessons, reviews, and also discounts on my screenwriting packages to help get your script, whether it's a comic book script, a screenplay, a teleplay, feature, what have you, into the best shape possible by your own agency. So consider subscribing to that.
Okay. And again, I'm Alan on Film Threat. Go to filmthreat.com for reviews. Let you know what's coming up. This Friday, we are talking about the Young Woman in the Sea. Oh, this is gonna be a horrible weekend. Ezra is another movie. Just come for the conversation. We'll talk about all the movies out there in the theaters this weekend. Next weekend is even worse. It's Bad Boys. That's the only movie out. But there's a saving grace. Next Wednesday on Hollywood on the Rocks, Chris Gore is coming back to Hollywood on the Rocks. And why? Because The Acolyte comes out on Tuesday, and we're going to talk about The Acolyte next week on Hollywood on the Rocks. Thank you, Disney, for saving us once again, for giving us interesting content to talk about. And so, again, I have to say that the success of Film Threat, especially over the last year, comes mostly in part because of the Walt Disney Company. And thank you. So with that, any final thoughts, Script?
No, thanks again for having me on today. Looking forward to Chris's return on Hollywood on the Rocks. And yeah, have a wonderful rest of the week, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, then let's get out of here.